Grüß, willkommen in einem Fragens video. Welcome to another exciting video. This case episode 19 of my Star Trek The Original Series Timeline Analysis series of videos. In this video I'll discuss the development of colonies under the United Earth and also the Federation. One aspect of the original series timeline I do find interesting is the large number of human colonies which are mentioned. In the 3 seasons of Star Trek of the original series, as many as 24 human colonies are named, as well as 26 human member planets, of which all but one would have been a colony. The United Earth and later humans in the Federation had a massive focus on colonization. I expect this was so there was lots of locations which episodes could be set. But putting aside the production requirement of the TV series, let's analyse how the colonies were established and developed. I'll not be covering Mars and Alpha Centauri in any great detail. I feel these colonies had an unusual development path, especially Mars. I'll create a special video on Alpha Centauri, so I will not mention that colony either. At the time, these 2 early colonies were the only game in town, and with low speeds, a single colony needed several spacecraft to provide support. Once speeds had moved up, this restriction was gone, and we move into a more standard development or quick path development path for colonies. Let's now look at the references in the scripts relating to the founding and development of colonies. The episode The Conscience of the King mentions there are 8,000 colonists on the planet. Based on my colony growth formula, this could mean that it is 13 years old. It's likely Kirk was 12 at the time, which means he could have been born on Tharsis 4, and his parents were early colonists. I've not studied this in much detail, and it may be interesting to drill down, as if true, it would mean his father could not have been a Starfleet officer, unless of course his mother was a single mother. The famine occurred 24 years prior to the episode it was mentioned, so it would have occurred in 2240. In the episode Charlie X, we learn colony planets have governors. In the episode Squire of Gothos, the Enterprise has to deliver supplies to Colony Beta 6. I suspect something went wrong, which is why a starship is delivering supplies. In the episode This Side of Paradise and the episode The Day of the Dove, we learn the initial population for a colony was 150, and it may well have included children, although I feel any children would have been born on the planet rather than actually being transported there. After all, it would be more efficient if that was the case. In the episode This Side of Paradise, we discover Omicron Psi-T3 was an agricultural colony, which I expect was the most common type of colony. I suspect food production was the biggest logistic bottlenecks of colonization and general travel through the vastness of space. It's also interesting that they were out of contact for 4 years, so they better be able to grow enough food to survive the 4-year period between contact from a central location. We also learn in this episode the leader of Omicron Psi-T3 wanted to ensure his colony did not fail as other colonies had failed. I'm not sure if he means earlier attempts on Omicron Psi-T3 or if this applies to other colonies affected by disease or perhaps famine or something of that nature. I suspect the former. Basically, what I'm saying here is that colonies can fail. Janus 6 was a mining colony, but it had an administrative head rather than a governor. The number of people on the planet was low, so I expect there was no civilians, or if there were no civilians, there's no need for a governor. We learned in the episode Operation Annihilate, Denver was colonized over 100 years ago, that is, compared to the current episode. It's not referred to as a colony in the quote, although later it is. The number of references to this planet without colony indicates that this is not a colony now, but was a previous human colony. I presume it was a colony planet which developed to the point it was no longer called a colony, which indicates it could be now a member planet of the Federation. While I cannot be absolutely certain, it's possible Denver had some ability or capability to construct spacecraft, as there is a one-man vessel of Denevan configuration mentioned. This is not a large ship, but would take a reasonable amount of industrial capacity to manufacture nonetheless. Denver has a population of 1 million people, which means a colony can hope to achieve that population in just over 100 years. The capital has a population of 100,000. Denver's development is considered as normal, but was originally colonised as a freighting line base. This could be normal for that type of colony, so an agricultural colony could develop into a planet with 1 million inhabitants much quicker. There are many other quotes in the scripts, but they generally back up the ones that I've already covered. The first point to consider here is that there are different types of colonies: mining colonies, penal colonies, in the case of Denver, a transport hub colony, and so on. A standard colony would probably initially focus on agriculture. Actually, all colonies would need to consider this. Shipping large amounts of food around is not very efficient, so any colony would first need to become self-sufficient in creating its own food. There are some exceptions, such as mining colonies, which are not inhabitable, but these would be few and far between. Thus, it's logical to assume all self-sufficient colonies start with initial 150 colonists, plus all the equipment and resources necessary to develop food production. They would have sufficient food for a number of years. The colony on Omicron Cetus was not visited for 4 years, so perhaps this is the amount of food required, although I suspect a bit less. On the other hand, the colony had communication facilities which they could use for any emergency food deliveries, so I expect 1 to 2 years is all that's really required in terms of food stock when you first establish the colony. This would require about 60 metric tons of food, probably less as most of the food would be dry and condensed. Once a colony can start producing excess food and builds up sufficient reserves, it can then call in for more colonists. Follow-on colony ships would contain more people and less stores, such as food. Perhaps 2,000 colonists per trip, perhaps 1 trip per year, would allow the colony to reach a population of 1 million within 100 years, assuming high but not absurdly high birth rates. This may be the point the colony world is no longer called a Denver colony and now is just called plain old Denver. Thus, becoming a Federation member planet, giving it additional autonomy and some influence in the Federation government, requires a certain population threshold to be met. This shows my estimate of the population growth of a colony over a 100-year period. Just note, this is assumed to be an agricultural colony. During the period a colony is considered a colony, it probably had a governor, as described in Charlie X and The Conscience of the King, and also implied in This Side of Paradise. The governor seems to have significant power, as in The Conscience of the Kings, the governor had the power of life and death. As a result, we can assume the colonies are governed by a governor representing the Federation, and there is only a minimal level of democracy allowed in this early stage. Elas, which is supposed to be the governor of Omicron Cetus, implies past colonies had failed. It's uncertain if he's referring to Omicron Cetus or to other failed attempts, but clearly colonies could fail. If it was Omicron Cetus, then the Federation would try again, being more cautious during the following attempt and splitting the colony up into smaller units perhaps. Colonies which did not start out as an agricultural colony would have experienced a slower rate of growth, which is what occurred with Denver. Some colonies on planets which are not habitable, no growth would occur. This would mainly apply to mining, research and penal colonies. As a colony grew, it would start to develop some industrial capability. In the case of Denver, it was able to build one-seat spacecraft, possibly to support mining facilities in the asteroid belts. The one interesting point was that there was no Federation contact for over a year. I expect if it was a full independent member planet, it would no longer need to provide reports to the Federation. But this was also considered as unusual, which is why the Enterprise went to investigate. Clearly, not many ships were flying around visiting various planets during this particular period of the Federation. What is interesting is, if there are 700 colony planets in 2264, the Federation could be sending 1.4 million colonists out each year. This would have required about 700 spacecraft, possibly closer to 1,400 spacecraft. The whole colonial program must have been truly massive. I would suggest almost all the colonists would be coming from Earth, as Earth would have had a population of about 20 billion in the 2260s. This outflow of people would have only been a rounding error to the total population of Earth at the time. Mars probably had a population of 1.5 billion at this time, so it could also be sending out some colonists, but clearly not many. While this is a very large number of spacecraft, if a planet of 1 million people needed to evacuate, even this fleet would have had a difficult time, especially if the evacuation had to occur quickly. There was no mass movement of people across the galaxy. Even with warp drive, the expense of moving millions of people across Federation space would have been probably not worth it, and there simply wouldn't have been the spacecraft to allow it. The humans of the Federation colonized Federation space by sending small numbers of people out across many worlds and just allowing standard reproduction to do its work. This could also explain why the Vulcans did not adopt a similar strategy, as their long lifespan would make it difficult by taking too long for a colony to develop, perhaps as much as 300 years to reach 1 million people. I do wonder why other races do not conduct a similar program. However, I suspect the motivation is the key factor. You do not colonize another planet to reduce the population of your home world, so that motivation really is not viable. This also explains why Gideon did not use colonization to solve its overpopulation problem. It's simply not logistically possible. Earth most likely instigated a colonization program because they were paranoid and fearful and wanted to grow to ensure they would survive. This was a very important driver in the psyche of humans, and after a while it simply became muscle memory. Earth engaged in a mass colonization program because it felt it needed to engage in a mass colonization program, and this lesson was learnt after the two massive world wars which occurred before they met up with the Vulcans. I'm also not sure about the Romulans and Klingons, but in that case they would have focused on conquering existing planets and extracting their resources. This would also allow them to become powerful, but because the humans were under the watchful eye of a benevolent but mysterious Vulcan race, they, that is the humans, probably decided to be the good guys and not go down the conquest path. And so we come to an end of episode 19 of my Star Trek The Original Series timeline, in this case covering the development of a human Federation colony planet. The episode scripts can be found using the URL shown. Alle guten Dingen kommen zu einem Ende.